Again, my name is Brian Butler, and I'm a CSE. I guess now I'm a CSE at Cisco since the acquisition, and we're very excited about that. And I'll even bring up a few different products maybe mentioned throughout this presentation that I think are important to know about. So let me get going here. So really what I want to talk about today is the insider threat that is really causing havoc in today's enterprise networks. And we're not here really to talk about the 98% that you catch, right? Your Trojans and your malware and things like that. It's really the 2% that you miss, and that's what StealthWatch is for. It's where it shines. It sees all that east-west traffic and just gives you a tremendous amount of visibility inside your network. It doesn't rely on signatures, and it's really finding the unknown in your environment. And that's really that's the 2% there is really what makes the news. In the past couple of years and all the data breaches, that's really where that's coming out of. And that's what we're going to discuss today. The first thing we really want to talk about is, what motivates an insider? And when I'm talking about an insider threat, it's really around users. It could be people hacking in, it could be stolen credentials, or it could just be a rogue employee, a disgruntled employee. And so we kind of look here at the Verizon data breach, and what they really say is there's just two different categories you would put them under. One is a financial gain. So they're not only just selling off the intellectual property or customer database from one company. They might be taking it with them to a new company, and that's the driving force of their being hired somewhere else, is that financial gain. The other one is just convenience, right? We set up roadblocks in security a lot where there's a vulnerability, so we stop allowing zip files to come through, but we don't really take the time to say, well, how is that going to affect the production flow of my employees? So if I don't give them access to stay productive and a process to do that and just block something they've been using for years, then they're going to find a way or try to find a way around the process that you blocked. And so that's another thing, and another conversation we'll kind of have throughout this is the policies you set up and working with your employees to make sure that they're productive, but they understand the reasons why there are hassles that are put in place for security reasons. And again, here's your top roles of the insider threat. It's mainly end users, okay? And again, end users, the way I see it, is an end user credential. Could be stolen, it could be a real credential and an employee sitting behind it. And a lot of times they're cashiers. They have access to a lot of different types of data, credit card data coming in, email accounts, addresses, and then financial. Financial departments and segments of your network have a lot more richer data about their customer base and the people that they interact with, including vendors and things like that. And then we tend to forget about executives, and I see this a lot when I go around where executives get a pass. So we always think, well, executives really have the best intentions for the company they're working for, and then that's not always the case. In two different ways. One, it's laziness or not understanding why you have to do certain things to keep sensitive documents safe, or it might be where they are looking for another job at a competitor, and they've been reached out and said, hey, if you come over, bring some of your ideas, your company's ideas with you. And there's been several times in the past 3 or 4 years, I could think of two distinct incidences where we bring in StealthWatch and we catch a very high-level person in the company sending data, sending sensitive documents out of and it's usually intellectual property that's going out, and in both times resulted in that executive being dismissed, and one of them was actually charged with a crime. So who's attacking the network? And so it really breaks down into 3 different categories. You have neglectful users. These are people that leave their laptop unlocked. These are people that write passwords down on Post-it notes and post them up in their cube. People that go to the airport and have no problem talking to their colleague about a link internally to go get some sensitive documents back inside. So those are all type of policies and education of your end users that need to be expressed, no matter what size of company you are. This is all letting people know that the company is concerned with the security posture and keeping things secure from malicious people. The other one is just the malicious insider. So these are people trying to steal documents, destroy systems. Someone gives 2-week notice. Someone's upset. They give a 2-week notice. They've been spending a month before that setting up roadblocks in the network. If they're an IT person, if they're a salesperson, they might have been trying to take all the contacts out of their database so they can take them with them, things like that. Then the third one is the compromised user. And the compromised user is the stolen credentials. So however it happens, someone gets the credentials of somebody that's legitimate in the company, logs in, and then if you have some sort of visibility into your network, they seem legitimate for the most part. And that's really where we're going to focus today. But before we start, let's just talk a little bit about trends in the enterprise network today. So we talked a lot of things about bring your own devices. So people bring a smartphone, a tablet, walk right around the firewall. And a lot of times people and employees, they think, well, I can get on the guest Wi-Fi. And a lot of times that's a good policy to have is, well, if you bring your own device, you have to be on the guest Wi-Fi. But it's still, you're bringing down, it could be like you have customers coming in and they're also on the guest Wi-Fi. Your employees come in and now all of a sudden the iPad operating system is pulling down a 1 gigabyte file to upload, to update, things like that. So it's not always just wrapped around security, but it's wrapped around that noise and that traffic that's being generated that makes it hard for you to apply security policies. The open network. So when you have access, that's really the guest here, but access from partners, contractors. So in the case of several of the breaches in the last couple of years, it was the contractors' password and credentials that was used to get in. So even though the larger company had a lot of policies in place to protect their own passwords and their credentials, what they were not watching was all of the credentials that were given out for VPN connections and things like that. And then social engineering, phishing. It's amazing how crafty people are today and how blatant it is, where I would think 5, 10 years ago, it wasn't as in your face as it is now. People really don't think there's any problem with trying to break in and steal intellectual property for gain or just to say for reputation to say they've done it. And that's where the Muleware comes in place. And I got a little quote here I'll pull up. And the last thing I'll talk about just briefly here is the cloud infrastructure. Are you ready? I've been dealing a lot with 2 or 3 of our customers that are moving everything into the cloud. And what they have found is there's no security in the cloud. And this is a quote right out of the Amazon Web Service documentation. And what it really says is we're not responsible for providing you security inside your cloud at all. And it's really the Wild West inside your cloud, especially in some of the customers that we have a very large presence in the cloud. And people come in, they steal certificates. They can come in through the back doors in the cloud and spin up. Even I had one customer that a Bitcoin miner was spun up and took all of their resources up that was available. They had no visibility into the cloud, and they were just kind of starting to move towards the cloud. So they had all this empty space. No one was really watching, and they ended up with a several $100,000 bill because that is really the reason why Amazon has no, or the cloud provider has no motivation to provide you security inside your cloud, because they're charging you for the data going in and out, and also the resources that are being used. And so it's a very big concern right now to a lot of people. We do offer a cloud security solution that's really going to give you that east-west visibility inside the cloud. And so I assume that everyone on the phone is somewhat familiar with StealthWatch, but just so you know, we are collecting flow that's created by routers, switches, firewalls, and then in the cloud, in this case, instances, where we're putting a sensor on each server instance that stood up that creates flow. And it will send it back into our traditional system, and it looks at that point just like any other system or any other segment of your network, but it's just out in the cloud. And we've rolled that out a couple months ago, and it's starting to be stood up in several of our customers. So here's the social engineering aspect. And social engineering, I think, is a lot of ways that these credentials are being stolen and being obtained. And there's a lot of dumpster diving, and that's just, you know, people getting access to documents maybe they shouldn't have, online surfing online, phishing, calling up employees. I kind of, and social engineering kind of group all this together. So I'm a sales systems engineer, so I'm pre-sales. So I go out and help people get set up and see what they need with security and StealthWatch. And I always do searches on customers before the process starts, so I can just find out, you know, what they are all about and how they're set up. And so everything I'm going to show you in this presentation, it's all real screenshots. I've sanitized everything. This is a screenshot of a hospital 28-page PDF that spells out their whole directory and hierarchy, including the directors, who their assistants are, what doctors work where, what nurses work under the doctors, everyone's their telephone numbers and their email address. This is something that should never be public facing, and this is how phishing starts right here. There was over 300 names listed in here that someone could just email in and try to start phishing and start gathering information. So I encourage everyone to go look and see what is your public-facing data that's out there that could be used against you, and maybe take steps to get that off. This was actually something on their website that someone had put up and thinking it was going to help customers out to find out where they needed to go and help other employees out. So also the bottom line here is educate your end users and have policy. It's not only, personally, it's not just something to put policy out and put rules out. It's much better if your end users understand why those policies are in place. So why do we not allow a zip file? You know, because there's ransomware on that when we click it, and we've just encrypted a lot of our hard drives over the past month. You don't want to be the one that's doing that, because it's a big inconvenience. So it's not only just having policy, but I think getting everyone on board with the security posture of the company. And here's what is Muleware. Muleware is just simply, I've heard this in the background at some conventions or some training courses, but it really just is someone is willing to give somebody something to get credentials, to get access to the network. And there's, this day and age, there's so many contractors that are out there, and everyone is seemingly doesn't stay at a job for very long, especially if you're a contractor and they're at a training course, someone understands, and that maybe it's a 5-week training course, someone here's where they work and would like to break in and starts asking how he could do that. You know, I could get you a job over here, and it's just a social way of social engineering your way into the company. So it's becoming more and more prevalent. So let's get down to this is the 5 signs of insider threat activity, and these are the ones I'm going to just briefly go over as we go through this. And I think the most important one is stolen credentials, right? because I think that is where it all starts, is that stolen credentials. 2 out of 3 breaches exploit was because of weak or stolen credentials, and that comes from the Verizon report in 2014. And it's really proved itself out over the past year or two on who makes the news and what comes in. And so just to point out a few of these breaches, everyone remembers the Target breach, and that was a stolen credential, and it was a big breach. And then prior to that was the Adobe breach, which only affected people that sent Adobe a few $100s a year, and that's who it affected, and loyal customers of Adobe. Home Depot, another big breach, and then I got up here Jimmy John Subs. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One is Jimmy John Subs, and I know this is a national webinar, maybe even international. Jimmy John Subs is a smaller restaurant. They have about 2,000 locations, and only 217 were affected in this. So here's the reason why I listed those. Those were the 4 in the past year that affected me. I have 4 different credit cards that were reissued because of those breaches. Now, of course, there were other breaches that were bigger and even more severe. I think the Sony breach was the most awakening for everyone, because that was the point where it just wasn't a stolen credit card that someone was out charging that the bank was going to pay you back for. It actually affected the business of Sony. They got in and installed the underworkings of Sony and intellectual property. It cost Sony a lot of money, and there was no way of recouping that. And so, but the whole, I think that in the industry, we lose sight of why are we doing this security? Why are we trying to find these insider threats? And this is the reason why, because of me, right? The customer. So the customer, I feel like Target and Jimmy John Subs disrespected me. They took my information in, and they didn't really value it. They didn't say, they just left it alone and didn't secure it. And I'm the one that had it cost me time, it cost me money, and that's what you don't want, right? You don't want to make the news, but you want to keep your customers happy and not lose your customer. So, and we'll kind of go through, I'll show you some, here throughout this, I'll show you some demos of how we can see that end user and pivot it around as we go through here. But let's just go to the next one, is suspicious behavior. So suspicious behavior is not only users, but also endpoints and segments of your network. What is it, is it acting abnormal? All right, so if you're a business and your colleagues and all of your connections should be within the United States, why do you have a bidirectional communication to China, right? And that's a simplistic way of looking at it, because anymore there are a lot of connections around the world, right? So it normally is, we do have connections to China, or we do have connections to Eastern Europe, but we only allow certain protocols. We only allow SSH or HTTPS to connect to them. And so why is there another connection or another attempt that's happening? So it's that visibility that StealthWatch can provide. This is a screenshot out of StealthWatch, this is a live map. Geographic anomalies of traffic. So again, this is to China, and this is a visual of FTP traffic bidirectional going in and out to China. All right, so 7 o'clock in the morning, there's a big pool of data leaving and going out to China. So this is that visibility that StealthWatch is going to be able to provide you that many people do not have. And it's a question where you should ask yourself, how much visibility do I really have in my network now? What's the percentage? And really think about it. Most people first will start out pretty high. They'll say 50 to 70%. But then when they really start thinking about it, almost all their visibility is on their edge. And there's not very much visibility, that east-west traffic inside. And that's where the malicious behavior is occurring, and that's where you need to catch it before data leaves your network. So again, patterns. This is a real screenshot right here of a customer. And what you're seeing here is inbound and outbound traffic. So if I look right here in this square, this is coming in, and what you're seeing is a 3-layer DDoS attack, okay? Just some little hits, many of them, several thousand of them. But why is that occurring? You know, there's really only 2 reasons why. One is they're trying to disrupt your business, right? They're trying to take away bandwidth, or they are trying to create a smoke screen, a lot of bytes flying around here, so they can extract this big 100 megabyte file that's going out to the internet, right? So in this case, what we're really looking for is an alarm right up in this area. We want to be notified, hey, there's a 3-layer DDoS attack that's going on, not over in here where it's affecting 50% of my end users and they're calling IT saying, hey, the network's slow. And of course, at that point, the extraction has already happened. So again, this is something within StealthWatch, we can give you that visibility, alert you on that abnormal behavior. Right? Again, time of day anomalies. This is something that is kind of overlooked because it's hard to find this out unless you really are going through data and charts and pulling back and going into Excel spreadsheet. But it's within StealthWatch here, you can just see it. Right here, we'll also alarm on. You can set this up and says, so what we're looking at here is server response time that's occurring. So in this case, at 2 in the morning and at 4 in the morning, in this case, the business does not do business. This is off business hours. They have very few employees that are in here. They don't have a lot of processes. There's no backups going on. But all of a sudden, there's a tremendous amount of slowdown on a couple servers. And why would that be? It would be because data is being pulled out of them or data is being pushed into them. Right? And so, again, this is that visibility that you need to detect that you have some sort of insider threat, some sort of rogue or malicious activity going on. So you can see how we can give several of views of that, and then when one happens, usually there's another alarm that fires off because it's not just the data being pulled, it's the server response time going up, and that's how StealthWatch really works. It's a combination of everything that's going on. It gives you that 100% visibility into your network. So another sign of insider threat is unauthorized access. And again, I'm going to look at this as unauthorized access as attempts of people trying to get in, or stolen credentials, where the person that's using the credentials is not authorized. So in this case right here, unauthorized access on this is we have some sort of compliancy. So we are PCI compliant or HIPAA compliant, or you just have what we like to call at LANCAP the crown jewels, right? This is your sensitive data. And there on the right is a map, and this map is in real time. And then in this case right here, I've got the PCI compliant servers. I do have PCI administrators that are coming in, but in no time should the PCI servers be talking to the internet or even attempting to talk, because a lot of people out here say, well, I have a firewall rule, and that says that this cannot come out. But what we really want to know is, are they attempting to come out too? Because that means something's going on. There's some malicious activity going on. Your firewall rule is blocking it, but it's trying to get out. So now, you know, it's up to you to block the hundreds or thousands of holes into your network going out. But the rogue employee, the malicious person, they only have to find one of those that's open. So the cards are stacked against you already, and this is that visibility that can help, you know, sway your success. So in this case right here, StealthWatch, we are gathering information and data between conversations of hosts. Okay, so host A talks to host B talks back, host B talks to host C. We're gathering this through NetFlow, but we're also analyzing it, and we have hundreds of algorithms that are looking at that type of behavior that's going on, but we can also take in identity information. So in this case right here, the username is Ethel. This is actually coming from Cisco ICE, And we can also take an identity from VPN connections coming across the ASA firewall. In this case, you can see here, look, Ethel is logged in 2 different places, in 2 different cities. That's impossible. So there's something going on here. You know, Ethel is either given her password out, or it has been stolen, or something is not normal. It's definitely against policy. And so this is something we can bubble up to the top and show you immediately that, hey, there's something wrong with Ethel. Something malicious is going on. So in this right here, this comes from the Cert Insider, and this is something that I like. This says that 30 days after giving their resignation is usually when an attack starts. Okay, so, and again, this could be stolen credentials. They've given their credentials away, or they're trying to get back in to get information that they need. Okay, sensitive data, customer databases, things like that. And so here's a map that I have built in several different of our customers, and have wrapped a document around it, a dashboard around it. But I have several customers, they have watched employees, and what they do is they put that user in there when they give their 2-week notice, or just when they want to make sure they kind of feel like something's wrong, and they want to watch them. And they watch the information, the data going out to the internet. And you can see here we can break that up where the middle one, right here we're watching there's 2.5 megabytes of traffic going out, but we can also break that up into different protocols like Dropbox, FTP. And then internally we're watching that employee go to some sensitive data. So in this case, if it's a salesperson, sales staff, then we might want to watch our database of our customers. Or if it's a engineer or developer, you might want to watch your intellectual property servers to make sure they're not attempting to get in there or pulling back information at a larger rate than they normally do, because they probably do have access to that. And now you want to limit that or just give that visibility to see what they are doing. So I wanted to go through an example of inside our product here that in this case, this is someone that's breaking in and going out into the internet and pulling data out. Right, so this is something here. This is our Stealth Management Console. So we can come in here and look, and this would really be, I'll have to state right here that this is something that you would probably do maybe after the fact. The alarm's already fired off, so you're going to come in and investigate. All right, so we can come in here and look and see there's a total of 1 terabyte that's been moved across in the last several minutes, which is a large amount. We can look right here and see that there's a DNS. This blue chart right here is DNS, which that is not normal for DNS traffic, right? Because each one of these little spikes is a 1-minute patch in time, and you can see that there's over 40 megabytes each minute being transferred. So that's in the case of like the target breach, where it wasn't DNS, it was NTP port 123, where they started pulling that back as the opening of the firewall on all those POS systems. They first started pulling back a few megabytes at a time, and then it got up to where it was almost 100 megabytes pull across port 123. And so there was just not the visibility set up to see or to alert on that type of anomaly. So I'm going to click in here, and now you can see, let's go over here. You can see the different traffic that's going on. And let's go to identity, and now we can see that this is coming from Cisco ICE, and the username is Frank. We can see the MAC address he's on, the device. This is the Windows 7 workstation, and actually where Frank's entering the network. So now we could actually reach out to ICE and tell ICE to shun this person off the network, send him to a sandbox VLAN for further investigation, but that way we block him from going anywhere else in the network until we figure out what Frank's doing with this alarm that's going off. And then let me go here. And then here's the actual attack. So over here on the we can see the different alarms that are firing off. There's data hoarding, data exfiltration, and suspect data loss. And data hoarding is a very important one because that's where we are monitoring the traffic with being collected. So I sit down at my workstation and start pulling data and touching multiple hosts. around the network, pulling it into one place. So this could be automated. This could be something that's going on behind the scenes, or this could be a rogue employee doing this and getting ready to walk out with it or send it up to the internet. And so in this case right here, you can see that here's Frank, and we're showing this is the flow table sitting behind it, and we're actually showing you exactly what's going on. Frank's sending out, in this case, 50 megabytes of traffic to China here, and he actually is in our sales and marketing department, and so in Atlanta, and here's what you can see: he's going to Dropbox, sending that out. So this is that visibility and quick and easiness of just clicking through. So we go from an alarm that may or may not mitigate, depending on how you want to set it up, and then incident response. Let's go in and let's see what's going on. So unusual data movement, which you started kind of hinting on, but let's delve into that a little deeper. And it's not only important to monitor just all of your data, your total amount of traffic going across, but unidirectional traffic. That's really the rogue employee. And it's also in this case, we're looking at protocol abnormal behavior. So in this is the correct protocol and what it should look like. And this is, of course, DNS. And if you look over here on the scale, it's 50K in and out. Someone's doing requests, things like that. Here's a very long URL, something like that. But again, as we showed before, here is DNS that's not being used in a typical way. This is 40 megabytes, and each one of these bars is a 60-second patch in time. So you can see that there, and it's actually going out. So someone is extracting data through that DNS, not typical. Right, so you want an alarm on it, and of course, in StealthWatch, we do have an alarm on it. Through our flow sensor and that deep packet inspection, we can look inside that payload, and in this case right here, we can see that Edward connected here to a terminal server, but he is using port 53, but through the deep packet inspection, we can see it's actually a P2P file in there that's going out to Puerto Rico. So, and that's an alarm. That's what we inside StealthWatch, that's called fake application alarm. You get this a lot at universities or higher ed where students are standing up telnet servers, or they're trying to stand up some sort of sling box to do Tor and things like that. You'll see different types of protocols getting used inside different ports. So here's the data hoarding. And to me, this is the most important when you talk about breaches and information of your customers or valuable and sensitive documents leaving. It's the data hoarding and the alarm, because what this is the collection of the data, and it is done prior to it leaving your network, this is where you want to catch it. Not always possible. Right? It might just start getting sent out to the internet, or this could be when someone's getting it, putting it on a flash drive and walking out the front door. Right? So this is where you want to catch it. And so our suspect data hoarding alarm, in this case right here, you can see that there's different algorithms that are used, and it's looking at total hosts that this IP address is reaching out to, this end user, what they normally reach out to and touch in a given moment of time, and the amount of traffic they normally pull back, or the amount of subnets they normally talk to. So all these algorithms are in play. And so in this case right here, you can see that they just pull back 10 gigs to pulling back from multiple host groups. And then inside our product, you can double click on this multiple host group and pull back all the hosts that they were talking to, what protocols they were using, what type of data, and how much was being pulled back. And then again, this is at the end, the data exfiltration. So data exfiltration is now it's going out of the network. So it is usually going to one or multiple places, and you want to look at that. Right? So let's go ahead and look at this. And this is something right here where someone's coming in, so disgruntled employee, and they're coming in and using DNS to encrypt and go out. So again, we can see traffic. We have an alarm. comes off, and we can see the different types of alarm here. We have suspect data loss, data hoarding, fake application detected. So there's several alarms that are wrapping up along this incident here, this data breach that's going on. So it's not just, in each one of these alarms, there's telling you one more piece of the puzzle of what's going on. So we'll go ahead and go down here, and again, we can see this is Edward, and we're getting this from ICE. Look here, we can see all the different alarms that are going off. And we can look in here, and again, this is again, Edward is connecting to a terminal server and sending it out to Puerto Rico, again, on port 53, but using an encrypted P2P file. But now we have an alarm where Edward has, from the terminal server, is connecting and pulling back SQL information. And so now we can see that it's a two-step process. They connect to the terminal server, they connect to your SQL, and then they encrypt it, and now it's going back out over port 53 to the outside. And again, several alarms have gone off, right? But this is after the fact, the incident response. So if you had some sort of mitigation through ICE, or we could reach out to a firewall and say, shut this conversation down, shut these ports off, shun these packets. But right here it's a very powerful screen, because this is really telling you exactly what happened in two different ways. Down here on the bottom, we can see by time and by amount of data that Edward came in through a remote desktop. He starts talking to the database, and then he starts sending that data. So he's collecting, he comes in, collects the data, and then sends it out to Puerto Rico. And right up here, your three different flows that happen and the different applications that was used, and the different port numbers. And so this is that visibility that StealthWatch can provide. It's just so powerful inside your network. And this is just something that's done just with the collection of flow. It's very, we always talk about the network as a sensor. So we're using your existing infrastructure to collect this flow and give you this visibility. So again, these were all the alarms that were firing off and you were being alerted on that was taking place against that whole, what we like to say, the attack continuum, where it's the whole attack that's going on. And at one point you could have stopped it, or we could have mitigated. Of course, we're letting this happen so we can demo this, but you could have stopped it when the SQL data was being collected, so the exfiltration never happens, which is the goal. So the last thing is policy violation. So policy violation, we talked a little bit about where you have set policies, maybe you have firewall rules built around them, or ACL rules, but still things happen, or your organization's small or it's large and you have problems keeping up with that. Like in this report right here is something I always build with customers, and we're listening for protocols. And so we can monitor your ACL and firewall rules. Great for segmentation, just great. We went into a DoD contractor, and part of their contract is they're not allowed to have Skype. Breaks their contract with the DoD, and they had just gone through over the last 3 months a ASA firewall refresh of 60 ASAs. And I sat down and we built this out. I put Skype in there along with Telnet and things like that. And the next day, 2 employees had Skype 90 gigs of traffic. Nothing malicious about it. They were just back there. They were videoing back to home, which is in another country. They were watching some movies. They just didn't know they weren't allowed to do that, and they had left the ports open on those firewalls because 60 firewall rule change or 60 firewalls being stood up over 3 months and just slipped through the holes. So it's very powerful. You can say we can monitor your ACL firewall rules and audit your firewall. So in this case right here, this is a screenshot from a customer. And if we look right here, they, of course, had DNS open on their firewall, and they had a tremendous amount of vulnerabilities when we walked into the door that existed on their network. And one of them was that this DNS server in China was actually being given out to most people that were logging in. And this is if you go there, I think it's closed now, but this DNS, and it was a functioning DNS, so they had no idea, but this is what, if you went there for a long time, what you would see, and it was a black DNS. And so this was a very large infrastructure, a very large enterprise. And so they just did not have that visibility to even see where their DNS was going, or where their traffic was going. Once it left, where was it heading to on the outside? So another type of policy is wrapped around your contractors. So a lot of these data breaches and exfiltration has really wrapped around contractors. And then with their credentials being stolen. In StealthWatch, you have the ability to customize alarms. And so in this case, I'm pointing here, I got to have this contractor alarm. It's been fired off. And here's a report wrapped around that. So in this case, I have my VPN contractors. When they come in, this is a map in real time. They're allowed to go over here and talk to my Boston segment. Maybe they're a SQL Server administrator. Maybe they upgrade printers, maintain the printers. But this contractor VPs into the network and is allowed to talk to Boston. But he's never allowed to talk to, say, anything else, any of these business critical servers. And I can monitor that in real time. But of course, the map is in real time. So what I want is a graph here that shows me history. In this case, it's for the last 12 hours. Customizable, you can last 24 hours. But what I did was I built this alarm called Contractor Abnormal Activity. So, and we do this, and this is a very, very powerful tool that just was introduced in our last version that came out. And in this case, I'm monitoring traffic between the VPN connectors, and I could do this between our host groups, which is just simply a container of IP addresses, or down to individual IP addresses or individual users. So in this case, it's the VPN contractor, and he's allowed to talk to Boston, and it must be this VPN account. So if it's not, I want an alarm. But as we all know, those stolen credentials happen, and so far, StealthWatch and everyone else thinks this is normal activity. B. Butler 03, he's allowed to VPN and connect to Boston. So down here on the bottom is really what we can say, this is what is normal for this contractor, and therefore when something happens out of these ranges, that's abnormal. So in this case, I have a range. He's allowed to contact and connect into our network between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. and 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. But even though I've given him 6 hours, he should never be in there for more than 6 hours. Maybe he should never be in for more than 30 minutes. And if so, I want an alarm. Or I've looked at StealthWatch and say under normal conditions that person uses about 50 megabytes of traffic when he's in. That's how much he transfers back and forth. So anything above that, I want to be notified. And that's what is going on right here, that these alarms are being fired off because this VPN contractor is coming in at all hours of the day. I built this after the Jimmy John's breach, which affected me because one of those 217 stores was next to our corporate office. And when I got a new card, and when I went and read about it, it was the vendor credentials that were stolen by a roommate that was running maintenance on the POS systems inside these 217 stores. And what they were doing was they were going in and doing RAM scraping and screen scraping of credit card transactions across those POS systems for about 3 months. And so Best would have stopped that, because right here we would have said, hey, they should only be in for 30 minutes each day, and that's it. And after that, I want an alarm. So very, very powerful, very, very, very powerful tool. I've set this up for several customers. And of course, when we fire off an alarm, you can do several things with it. And one is you can email out to whoever you want. And we set it up to email the actual vendor and says, hey, you had a contractor in here that was in at authorized times. And I think that's a very powerful tool for security. It's like hanging that ADP sign in your yard. You know, I have an alarm system. I'm conscious of you being in here. So that wraps up my presentation. I hope it was beneficial for you. I hope you maybe learned a few things.